You're listening to TheESP, the European Skeptics Podcast, an independent weekly show set out to bring you news, interesting topics, and interviews with people mostly from Europe, building bridges and breaking down language barriers to show the world how active and awesome the skeptical movement is in the region. This is episode 501. Woo! I'm your host, András Pinter, and joining me for the show is my shouting friend, Pontus Beckman.
Hey, András, over 500 now. That's great.
God, what have we done?
Yeah, I know. I'd like to say a big thank you to our guests on the previous episode.
Yes.
The 500th episode. Marsh, Chris, Claire, Susan, Deborah, Adrian, Richard, and of course then Annika and Brian, who couldn't be there, but they sent in their hellos anyway. And it was it's great to see that many people joining in for the ESP. I really enjoyed that. For those who missed it live and still want to see our faces, I can say there's now an edited version on YouTube, which there are links to from everywhere. So if you wanna see it a little bit better, a little bit flashier. Not flashier is a big word, but at least you can. I've cut out the first minute when we were not sure if we were live or not, so it looks more professional. And I have one correction from that episode. Actually, it was Marsh who did a calculation, and we did not contradict him because it sounded right to us as well. But the episode from QED will be number 503, not 502, if things goes as we plan it. And we never know, of course, but that's right. I think 503 is that a prime number? I would guess it's a prime number. Maybe not.
503?
It sounds very uneven to me, but
yeah.
Well,
I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know either. It's late in the evening, and we will not try to figure that one out. If you know a prime number, please send it to us at info@theesp.eu, and we will try to sort it out. Any prime number will do.
Yeah, speaking of primes, primates are very fascinating as well. So it's not a surprise that a lot of people are interested in them, but I believe nobody was more interested than Dame Jane Goodall. And Goodall died, unfortunately, about 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And she was such an amazing person, a pioneer who showed that the careful observation, evidence, and open-minded skepticism can change how humanity understands itself.
Yeah,
I'd like to mention a couple of things about her because I've always been fascinated by her work. Occasionally, I found her interpretations a little bit too on the spiritual side of things, but somehow she managed to always keep it within those limits that even a skeptic would not contradict. So, amazing line of work. And she began that work in Tanzania, Gombe Stream National Park in 1960. She wasn't a trained scientist, but she brought with her the most important skeptical tool of all, curiosity without prejudice. So she questioned the long-held assumptions that separated humans from other animals, and through meticulous fieldwork, she proved that chimpanzees make and use tools, hunt in groups, and form complex social and emotional bonds. And that is amazing how before her work, those were not even assumed about the chimpanzees. Yeah. That is absolutely mind-blowing. And her findings were absolutely revolutionary and, of course, controversial, because this is how science works. Like, she came up with stuff that a lot of people were not willing to accept. So critics accused her of being too sentimental, especially because she named her chimpanzees instead of numbering them. But Goodall's data stood up to scrutiny. Decades of peer-reviewed research really confirmed her observations and, eventually forced science to revise its view of what it means to be human and to be a humanoid or be a primate, to give it a wider scope. So her life really reminds us that skepticism is not cynicism. It's the disciplined refusal to accept claims without evidence. So no matter how traditional or comforting they may be, she never took authority as proof, and she never let emotion replace data. even though she could be very emotional in her interpretations, which I found very moving, because that's how she got to people. She really made them listen. But on the other hand, she also proved that empathy and scientific rigor are not opposites. They are partners in understanding, and I'm pretty sure that what constitutes good science communication as well. So she died on October the 1st, and she was 91 years of age.
That's a good run. I mean,
it's a good run. Amazing.
No, speaking of primates, I think the Pope, he will show up later in this episode. Not in person, unfortunately, but the Pope has the title Primate of Italy, doesn't he? But I think that Jane Goodall was a better primate than any Pope.
Okay. Yeah, the primate of Italy. But Jane Goodall was an expert on primates, so I wonder how much she actually researched the Pope. But I'm not sure about that.
No.
Yeah. I really like how courageous she was when it came to questioning even our species' superiority. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we all agree that in some ways we overgrew our distant cousins, but in other ways we're not really that different. And she pointed that out pretty clearly and backed up with scientific evidence, and that is super cool.
Yeah, you say she questioned things, and that is very important. And many skeptical organizations question the world around them, of course, and others around them who are doing things that are not quite up to snuff, as we would say. So many skeptical organizations have this tradition to appoint mocking awards for quacks and others who are making the world worse, actually, by spreading misinformation. In Hungary, Andras, you have the Flat Earth Award. Australia has its Bent Spoon Award. We have the Rusty Razor in the UK, which will be announced in less than 2 weeks' time now. And
you
Sweden,
have the Confounder of the
I was
year.
getting to that. In Sweden, we have the Confounder of the Year Award, or the Misleader of the Year, or whatever, how you translate that.
I love the word confounder.
Yeah, well, I'm sticking with that. But in the Netherlands, and this is what I'm getting at, in the Netherlands, the Association Against Quackery, or the Vereniging tegen de Kwakzalverij, the VTDK.
Or something to that effect.
Yeah, well, I'm doing my best here. They have the Master Kackadoris Prize, or the Meester Kackadoris Prize. I shouldn't try to do that. I don't know. No, I don't know.
Are you trying to do this?
Yeah, I don't know. Sounds like I'm mocking them. I'm not. What needs to be mocked is the recipients of this prize. You can translate it as Distinguished Charlatan Prize, something like that. Anyway, we got this news item from Catherine de Jong, who we've had on the show, who is the secretary of the VDTK. And they have now announced the winner of the Master Kackadoris Prize for 2025. It went to the executive board of the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam and why would you give it to a university? Well, the university appointed a chiropractor called Sidney Rubenstein as professor by special appointment. Chiropractic is, of course, quackery. And it's not a proven effective treatment. There are certain chiropractic people who are doing fairly good things, but they are doing that by ignoring all the bullshit that's part of quackery, of chiropractic. So, since it is considered quackery, it is not reimbursed from the basic healthcare insurance in the Netherlands, not recognized by the Accreditation Organization of the Netherlands and Flanders, that's what it's called, NVAO, it's the abbreviation. So from the announcement, I quote, the VDTK believes that with the appointment of Rubenstein, VU Amsterdam, that's how you normally name them, VU Amsterdam has brought quackery into the university. VU Amsterdam has a first with this, a quack as a professor, says Emeritus Professor Michael V. Hengeveld, who is a psychiatrist and chairman of the jury of the Master Kackadoris Prize. So well done to the VDTK to call this out. And thank you very much, Catherine, for letting us know so we didn't miss this.
To me, Kackadoris sounds like a Greek word. With the Hungarian dubbing, there are these very funny Greek-sounding names that mean something like shit. So kaka is a word that we use for shit in Hungarian.
I think that is true in also in German and in French. So I'm sure that's not a coincidence. It's It's part of the whole thing there.
But Kackadoris absolutely sounds absolutely Greek to me.
Yeah. Yes. Pure Greek to me as well.
All right. Before we completely ruin every connection that we have to all kinds of European people.
And languages, yeah.
Yeah, and languages as well. So we don't want to offend anyone. Both of us just love to play around with the languages. And that's how we end up talking rubbish like that. But to prevent that from happening any further, I think we should concentrate on the regular segments of this show. And the first of which is always TWISH, or This Week in Skeptical History. So today, I'd like to explore that's a simple change in how we count the days, but it became a milestone of rational thinking. And that is the story of the Gregorian calendar and what it teaches us about science, evidence, and skepticism, because the 15th of October marks the anniversary of the introduction of that calendar. To give you a little bit of context, most of the Middle Ages saw Europe living by the Julian calendar, right? Introduced by Julius Caesar back in 46 BCE. And it was a very clever system for its time. Caesar's astronomers calculated a year as 365.25 days, adding a leap day every 4 years to account for that 1/4 of a day, right? That was very smart. But unfortunately, nature is a bit more precise than that, so we have to adjust. And unfortunately, for a long, long time after Caesar's introduction of his calendar, we didn't. And as the Earth's journey around the sun actually takes 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds, about 11 minutes shorter than the Julian year, even though it seems like a very tiny difference, over 1,500 years, that small error pushed the spring equinox about 10 days earlier on the calendar.
Yeah, it adds up.
It really adds up. So when we're talking about long durations of time, absolutely makes a huge difference. So 10 days, it's a huge difference. And by the 1500s, the sun said it was March 11th when the church calendar insisted it was March 21st. Something had to be done because it was really a great, big problem for calculating the date of Easter.
Especially, I think, for the church, right? Because suddenly you're celebrating the saints on the wrong day, and you're celebrating Christmas. Christmas was perhaps not the biggest one. Easter was probably the most important.
Exactly.
One.
Yeah, it was. It was supposed to track the heavens. So that's a big problem if you miss that. So in 1582, Pope Gregory XIII called for a reform. And he had a brilliant team of scientists led by Aloysius Lilius, a brilliant physician and astronomer, and Christopher Clavius, a Jesuit mathematician. And they used the best astronomical observations available, many of which were inspired by the Copernican model of the solar system. Ooh. Which might sound a little
Maybe
bit...
did that on the side without telling the Pope?
No. It was... actually, the thing is that the Copernican system, even though in general and towards the general public, it was mostly depicted as something like a mathematical model instead of the depiction of reality. However, astronomers who knew their shit, they accepted it as fact, because why wouldn't they? Everything pointed towards that. So it wasn't really that much of a question. So the reason why, for example, Galileo Galilei got into trouble a lot later than that, like 50 years later, was because he was probably a bit of a dickhead. And he was a bit of a problematic person who really liked to shove it under everyone else's nose that they were wrong about things. So yes, he was a bit of a troublemaker. I think it was the very reason why he got into trouble, not the fact that he was right. So Lilius and Clavius, they really brought about something that was a huge deal. And they came up with what was later called the Gregorian calendar. And the brilliant thing about that was that it kept leap years, because that was a good invention, but with a subtle twist. Century years would only be leap years if divisible by 400.
Yeah.
So 1600 and 2000 stayed leap years, but 1700, 1800, and 1900 did not. And this tweak trimmed the average year to 365.2425 days, which is almost exactly matching the tropical year. And that is brilliant. So to fix the existing drift, the reform simply deleted 10 days because it has already been there. So in Catholic countries, the 4th of October, which was a Thursday, 1582, was followed by a Friday on the 15th of October. So 10 whole days were basically gone.
Well,
it's
it had
really
to be done,
difficult
right?
to comprehend, but it had to be done.
Yeah.
And from a scientific standpoint, this is more than a clerical adjustment. It was an act of skeptical correction. The reformers trusted measurement over tradition, even though they were clerics. They saw that the heavens, that was the evidence, contradicted the inherited system, and they had the intellectual honesty to change the calendar accordingly. Well, the motivation was that they had to adjust to what was said about the heavens, about what's going on in the Catholic calendar and all that. So the motivation we don't need to deal with at all. It's the fact that they decided that something had to be done from the scientific point of view. It was, in a sense, a moment when the church, often seen as conservative, well, it is, but it acted on empirical reasoning. Yeah. And it showed that even in the 16th century, the observation and mathematics could guide reform, not just authority or scripture. Isn't that brilliant?
Yeah. We want to have more of that, I think.
Yes, exactly. Well, not all of them thought the same way about it, because, all of the people in Europe, because, of course, not everyone was convinced. Protestant Europe was wary of anything decreed by a pope.
Of course.
So that hindered the change in those countries. But on the other hand, Catholic nations adopted the new calendar immediately. Others refused for decades, some even centuries. So Britain and its colonies switched only in 1752. So almost, 170 years later.
Well, that must be really confusing when different countries have different dates.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, my God.
And historical chronology has to deal with that as well. So that is a nightmare. But the fun thing is that by the time Britain made the switch, the number of days that they had to skip was not 10 days, but 11 instead. So in 1752, from September the 2nd, they went straight to the 14th of September. So, and of course, rumor has it that there were riots shouting, "Give us back our 11 days." But historians usually doubt that story. So, but it's still funny that people were concerned about that. Maybe. Did you know that Sweden also fumbled this transition?
No, I did not.
They went their own very funny ways because they even invented a one-off February the 13th before getting it right in 1753. So
I apologize on behalf of my fellow Swedes. That was stupid. We will not do that again. I promise.
But the one country that really refused to go along with the change for a long, long time, we're talking about more than 300 years, and that was Russia.
Yeah.
And they held up until after the Bolshevik Revolution. So when you read that the October Revolution happened in November, that's literally true by the old Julian calendar. So I think this whole reform is a quiet but profound milestone in science prevailing over faith. And that way, I think it's very relevant to skeptics and skepticism in general, because it shows how data can challenge deeply held traditions and how slowly and painfully societies adapt to evidence. And here's to the anniversary, which was on the 15th of October.
Great. I'm glad we did it anyway. Eventually.
Yes.
We got to that. Yes. Otherwise, it would have been...
Yeah, had to set things straight. It's not good to just lag behind. All right, but that brings us to the next segment, which is when we talk about what's been happening across Europe lately.
Yes, 2 weeks ago, we talked about dementia and how it's associated with alcohol. Yeah. And I have a new news item this week. It won't change any of what we said before. Alcohol is still bad for you, but this is about dementia, and there's actually one thing that seems to help a little bit. As we know, there is nowadays a vaccine against chickenpox, which is great. But it is, for some reason, still not part of the mandatory or recommended vaccine program for children everywhere. In some countries it is, but in many countries it is still not. And in my day, and in yours as well, I believe, Anders, all children got chickenpox sooner or later.
Yeah.
Or varicella, as it's called as well. My children had it too. It's pretty uncomfortable and awful to have, actually, even if you normally recover after a week or two. So in a way, people tend to say, well, that's something everybody has to have, but it's not that bad. Well, I am here to tell you it is bad. As many listeners are aware, it doesn't end there. The varicella virus does not go away when you recover. It actually stays in the body. The immune system can keep it at bay for a long time, so you may feel fine, but very often after 50 years or so, the varicella can become active again. I guess the immune system cannot always keep it in check forever, so the efficacy of the immune system diminishes over time and then it comes back. And if it is reactivated, it comes back as shingles, which, if nothing else, can be extremely painful, I've heard. Really bad. And also, if the shingle or the painful skin rash hits your face, or rather somewhere close to your eyes, one eye, it can actually make you blind. So it's really, really bad. Because of this, it's a very good idea to get a shingles vaccination when you're past 50. If you had chickenpox when you were young, and most people living today did have that, if they are now over 50. So I did that. I got the vaccination. The only issue with that is that it's rather expensive normally. For me, I paid a little bit more than 200 euros.
Wow.
For one shot, but you need 2 shots to get a full thing. So I paid somewhere between 400 and 500 euros to get it fixed, sort of. Okay, but I started to talk about dementia, and maybe you think I've forgotten that I've talked about dementia, but I'm not that demented yet. I'm coming to dementia. I'm coming to it now. Because according to 3 different meta-studies, people who are vaccinated against shingles have a reduced risk of dementia. And this is very interesting and may seem at first a bit random. Why should a vaccine against the varicella virus also protect against dementia? I'm not sure everybody knows exactly why that is yet, but there is one plausible explanation or hypothesis. It is not unlikely that shingles sometimes trigger an immune response in the body that affects the microglial cells in the brain. These cells are part of the brain's immune system, and if they are stressed, they may trigger aging of certain brain cells, which in turn, or so this hypothesis says, could lead to dementia in some cases. So it's not like the shingles vaccine is an antidote against all dementia. It's more like it prevents shingles from triggering some sorts of dementia. So it turns out that having diseases that stress your immune system is not a good thing. People who are anti-vax or claim that having a disease is better than getting vaccinated often tries to argue against vaccinations, but at least in this case, the vaccine has an extra positive effect that was not previously known. So it's good news. So if you are 50 or above, you probably have had chickenpox in the past. And if so, you can, and you should, if you can, try to get vaccinated against shingles. Not only will you drastically reduce your risk for shingles, you will also eliminate one factor that can contribute to dementia. Yeah.
Amazing. Eat this, anti-vax people.
Yeah.
So, speaking of anti-vax, there's a growing problem with people on that field and other things that people are just outright capable of denying, like climate change. We mentioned Jane Goodall earlier, and she was an amazing advocate for saving biodiversity and environmental protection as well. But apparently, Pope Leo XIV is among those people too.
Wow.
So there seems to be a new twist in how climate debate and faith intersect. So Pope Leo XIV has weighed in forcefully, criticizing climate change denial and calling for more responsibility in addressing the climate crisis. There was an address that he recently made on the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si, which was the environmental encyclical of Pope Francis. And the current Pope issued some of his most pointed remarks yet on climate change. And he condemned those who, and I quote, deride the increasingly evident signs of climate change, ridicule those who speak of global warming, and even blame the poor, end quote, for its effect. That is very upright and outspoken from the Pope. Good for him. And he used the occasion to call on citizens, not just governments, to increase pressure for stronger policy, stronger regulation, and deeper ecological conversion, which is a shift that not simply in discourse but in values and behavior seem to be manifesting. So he contrasted this with a narrative of indifference or resignation. Well, I didn't think I would say at any point that I'm in complete agreement with the Pope. But apparently, this has happened. And of particular note, the speech that he gave comes just days after the US President Donald Trump referred to climate change as a con job, a comment which clearly loomed in the background. I don't know if you've seen that, the videos of that, but it was just ridiculous. And Leo's remarks really carry a geopolitical edge in that regard, because it seems to be positioning him in contrast to skeptics, climate skeptics, particularly within conservative political circles. And that is very progressive. He also reaffirmed the Vatican's environmental ambitions because he approved plans to build a large solar farm north of Rome with a view to making Vatican City a carbon-neutral state.
Ooh. Well, it's not a big state, so maybe that's feasible.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It seems to be. It seems to be.
It's like the postage stamp, basically.
Well, I don't know how many servers they do have that require lots of energy.
They have a Minecraft server. Remember? We talked about that. Maybe that is something.
Yes, you're right. Okay, but there is a nuance here. So that's something we have to talk about.
All right.
Because he didn't single out specific politicians by name. He preferred to frame his critique in moral and theological terms. Well, I'm not sure that wouldn't have been counterproductive if he did, but that's something to consider. And while he spoke forcefully of climate denial, some critics, denialists, will question whether rhetoric translates into meaningful shifts in energy policy, which we have seen in many of world leaders and their actions. If you think about it, they are all talk and no actual deeds match their rhetorics. Yeah, as you mentioned, it's a small country, so I don't know how it will affect accountability for high-emitting industries or the willingness of powerful states to act. But the most important questions that arise, the scope and specificity of that speech, because how far will the papal encouragement go in pushing actual emissions cuts, regulation or enforcement? So we don't know. He should try to use the opportunity of him being like a moral leader to convince others, but not sure about the actual feasibility of that. Authority and influence on his part doesn't seem to be that strong, at least as of yet. Lots of secular states out there. We don't know to what degree kind of religious leaders shift policy when it comes to that, right? Especially when science and economics are often mediated through national interest or industry power, and definitely not faith. Well, we don't want to see faith leading the way. Don't get me wrong. It's just that the focus is usually different. And when it comes to a moral framing versus a scientific argument, when it comes to Leo's strongest ground, that is moral and theological, right? And there's a risk of conflating moral authority with empirically supported science without transparency, and that we don't want to see. But there might be a backlash as well, because among some Catholic conservatives or political circles, as we know from all over the world, this will be read as ideological overreach and possibly undermining his influence among those who are denying climate change. So I'm cautiously optimistic about his role in shifting climate policies, but it's good to see him standing up for it.
Points for trying, anyway. He's still new at the job, so he maybe is still learning by doing. But we'll see. As you say, I'm not sure that it will make a big difference. But there's a lot of Catholics out there, and presumably they listen to him. And some of those Catholics are in powerful positions. So maybe we'll see.
That's true.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go back to a subject that has been increasingly mentioned over the last months or so, I guess, also on this show, and that is drones, because I feel that this is the new scare that we need to get to grips with. On the 3rd of October, there was another incident, this time in Munich, when the airport was closed for the second time in 2 days after drones were spotted at several airports around Munich and also over military installations. A confidential police report was quoted in German press saying that the sightings at Munich airport was just the tip of the iceberg. Also in the same report, it said that the drones spotted at Munich airport were, quote, used militarily, end quote, without specifying further what that means. 3 drones were also seen the day before, seemingly flying in formation above the base of the Federal Police's airborne unit near the northern town of Gifhorn. Other sightings in the past 3 days before this included a small aircraft reportedly flying over an ammunition depot in northern Germany. Dozens of flights were diverted or cancelled because of this at Munich airport after both runways were closed following the sightings, and operations couldn't be resumed until the following day. So there was a lot of delays and stuff and problems about that.
Oh God, I really feel for those people affected by that.
You're a frequent traveler. You don't like it when the planes get cancelled or the flights get cancelled.
No, I know how hard it is to deal with that when it comes to like large groups traveling together. Oh, God.
Yeah. Now, the question, of course, about these drones, are they military or not? Are they a threat of any kind? At least in one case, it turns out that one drone had been piloted by a man who was, quote, overly eager to test a new hobby drone, end quote.
No.
And the Frankfurt police says that this guy, he faces a heavy fine now. But I think he seems to have been harmless. He was just overly eager. So there were many sightings, at least one drone because of this guy, but we don't know what the other sightings really were. In Copenhagen, on the other hand, it turns out there was no drones. 2 weeks ago, we reported about drone sightings at Copenhagen airport. Now the authorities have presented their report from this, and guess what? They cannot confirm the presence of a single drone. Of course, that doesn't mean 100% that there were no drones, but as I also said last week, it's not at all inconceivable that people are seeing things that just isn't there, or they see things and they misinterpret them. Then we can go to Sweden, where up north, near the city of Luleå, on the 13th of October, it was reported that there was a virtual invasion of drones, hundreds of drones. Claes Svan, I mentioned him before, Sweden's most qualified ufologist and also an expert in folklore and fairy tales and cryptids and other such things. He's very good at that. He took it upon himself to investigate what was going on and started to interview people who were reporting this. And after doing that, talking to several witnesses, he really went down there. He compared their stories to each other, verifying exact timings and directions of the observations. He concluded that people mistook several stars for drones. It was just stars, specifically Betelgeuse, or Betelgeuse, I don't know how to pronounce that in English really, and Sirius, and maybe possibly seen through unusual atmospheric conditions. So you see something, it looks different than usual, and you suddenly think it's drones. But we shouldn't dismiss all of these sightings. But sometimes it may just be a man overly eager to test his new toy, or it may be stars or other phenomena. And also in the meanwhile, we need to, of course, acknowledge that Ukraine is constantly attacked by very deadly and very real drones. The European Commission on the 13th of October proposed expanding an initiative for a drone wall, quote unquote, on Europe's eastern flank to protect all of the continent. And of course, that is something that should be done, of course, because those drones are real. But we skeptics should also bear in mind that a lot of the sightings and reports that we hear are part of a new UFO phenomenon, if you will. This is, a lot of it, I think, is mistaken observations. And since drones are so much in the news, people attribute those sightings to drones rather to UFOs for now, because that's what people are thinking about.
You know what? At this point, I would really prefer those sightings being real alien visits, because the thought of these drones just flying around uncontrolled and not being able to do anything about them, posing a threat, I'd much rather choose a threat from alien visitations.
Would be much more interesting. Would be much more interesting. Yeah,
definitely. It wouldn't completely destroy my trust in humanity either. So I don't know. Well, speaking of my trust in humanity,
here we go.
It's a good thing that we have an idiot-in-chief in Europe as well. And there seems to be a man called Nigel Farage. Earlier this month, Reform UK and his leader, Nigel Farage, sparked a bit of a controversy when he suggested in an LBC radio interview that migrants in Britain were, and I quote, eating swans in royal parks.
Oh, the Queen's swans! No, save the Queen. Well, the King's now, I guess.
Wait for it, taking carp from ponds and eating them.
Oh, boy.
So if it sounds awfully familiar, then yes, this is a claim that is very similar to what was making rounds in the United States back in the presidential campaign. So Farage framed this as a cultural difference, and when pressed for evidence, admitted neither he nor the listener could reliably prove or disprove it. Because, but there were listener questions, and he was really questioned about that, and he just dismisses it like that. He's a douchebag. And his full line of argument was that if someone claimed swans are eaten in royal parks and carp removed from ponds by people from cultures where it's acceptable, would you accept that as happening? When asked whom he had in mind, he responded that, and I quote, people who come from countries where it's quite acceptable to do so, and later specifically mentioned Eastern Europeans or Romanians. Well, I have to tell you, we are from Eastern Europe, and we do not eat swans or just carp from any pond.
Royal or not.
So we do eat carp, but the way we do it is that we go fishing, but fishing is very highly controlled. We have to have a license to fish. And when we do that, we fish them out. We cook them and we eat them. That's for sure. But we don't eat swans.
There's no license for that.
No license for that. We just leave swans alone. And
swans are pretty... they're scary,
they're aggressive.
Right?
They
are
aggressive.
Big and aggressive. If they come against you with hissing and stuff, they would eat me rather than I'm eating them.
Yeah, quite likely. But let's see, because Snopes dealt with this. So what does the evidence actually show? The fact checks and official sources strongly dispute Farage's claims, and it's not a big surprise. So, first of all, Royal Parks Authority, which oversees London's 8 royal parks, stated explicitly that no incidents have been reported of people killing or eating swans in those parks. That should be case closed, right? Yeah. But apparently, it's not how it works. That fucking idiotic claim still circulates. Yeah. And the RSPCA weighed in, pointing out that a viral video often used to back the claim is in fact from 2010 from a TV show called Animal Squad. In some countries, I think it's marketed as Emergency Animal Rescue, and that the clip shows insufficient evidence to establish wrongdoing or that it involved migrants at all. And when it comes to the carp allegation, Farage was vague about location and timing, obviously, because
he made it up.
When he gets specific, it will soon be learned that you just made the whole thing up. Some social media videos claim carp were removed from ponds in Portsmouth and link these to asylum seekers, but no proof has emerged. and police later shelved investigations due to lack of evidence.
Yeah.
So, but the problem is that when police shelves investigations, for a lot of people, can be interpreted as, yes, it's a cover-up. So that leads to conspiracy theories. But also, historical incidents which involved swans do occasionally exist. Like, for example, mutilated swans found in canals or reports from past years. But in those cases, the identity of culprits was unclear or investigations yielded no ties to migrants. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they had nothing to do with that, but no evidence means no evidence. So that means that we cannot claim just outright something without any kind of evidence. Moreover, swans are legally protected under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 in the UK. So it's an offence to kill or harm them without license. The bottom line is there is no credible evidence that migrants are systematically killing them, nor that carp theft in ponds by migrants is verified ongoing practice.
The tragic thing is that it works as a rhetorical thing. He doesn't believe that this is happening. He doesn't care if it's true or not. He just makes it up because he knows it works, because people get upset. And even if you can laugh at that, some people will take it seriously and say, there must be something in it. And finally, somebody who's telling it as it is, which is ridiculous. But he is a dangerous man.
And his claims and himself needs to be stopped in some way. Well, I want to make it clear, I'm not inciting violence here. So I just want him politically to be stopped. I want him to be sidelined. I want him to be ignored based on, common sense, because he's an idiot and he's just a cynical person who would do anything to get into power. And if British people are not resilient enough in respecting the truth, we will see him become the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and that will be catastrophic. And not for the UK only. It will be catastrophic for Europe and many other countries around the world. Yeah. So please don't let that happen.
Yeah. Turns out common sense is not as common as it should be.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. One more thing about not being very rational, I think. The background is electricity prices are peaking in large parts of Europe at the moment, at least in the north of Europe. I'm not quite sure about South Europe, but electricity is getting more and more expensive. So how about a plug-in box which promises to save you money by making household appliances work more efficiently? That sounds great, right? Maybe you can drive down your usage by putting in a voltage regulator, whatever that is, that can cut your costs almost by a third. So these are promises that are you can see on websites, on social media, all over the place. They're selling fancy gadgets for everything from 10 to several hundred euros. And they often claim that they will save you money by managing the electricity supply efficiently and therefore reducing your electricity bill. Often labeled as, quote, Eco Plus or energy saving plugs. They are advertised and sold through social media mostly, or also via cold calls. You just call people up and try to sell them things.
Yeah.
This is, of course, something that is too good to be true. If there was a magic box that can fix your energy consumption by just plugging it in, it wouldn't be sold the way they are sold. They would be promoted probably by the energy companies themselves, because it's in their interest as well to manage energy consumption. But also, often, the sale of these things is simply a scam, and people receive nothing after the payment goes through, or they just steal your credit card information and they use it for other purchases. And if a plastic box actually do arrive, it happens, they're often poor quality. They are badly soldered. They contain too much lead. They are not approved for use in, EU. This is happening in the UK, but it's happening in EU as well, I guess. And they are not approved for usage here and can be very unsafe. So be safe. Don't fall for this. I'm sure most of our listeners would never fall for this, but you probably are surrounded by friends and relatives that may not be as skeptical as you are. And if you hear them considering buying these things, please warn them and tell them it's just a scam.
Yes. Well, I'd like to finish the news round with something very uplifting. Because Snopes, which is one of the leading fact-checking organizations, and we often quote them, we often use their material, and we really admire their work. So they just announced that they launched an official mobile app. Ooh. And the aim with that is to bring its verification tools directly to users' phones. And according to the announcement, the app offers a number of core features, like to search their full archives of fact checks and investigations, which is already an amazing tool. Use something that is called a fact bot assistant to pose questions or verify some claims. My understanding is that it's also based on the archive of their articles and investigations. So that's how the FactBot uses the information that it's already there. So it's not going to make things up and not do its own investigation, but draw from already existent ones. You can browse the latest fact checks, save articles to a reading list as well, and play a true or false game to test your own ability to spot misinformation, which is really cool.
Not bad.
In Hungary, we have a website that is called Urban Legends, and they do that too. And it's always good fun to do that test. And it constantly reminds you as to how susceptible we all are to these pieces of misinformation. And there's a crossword puzzle featured as well that is tied to Snopes' brand as a knowledge site. And those are the major features as well that are worth mentioning. Snopes emphasizes that this app is meant to make fact-checking more immediate and accessible. They say the truth is now just a tap away, and I think that's a very good way of putting it. On iOS, the app is already live with version 1.2.
I can verify that. I just downloaded it as you were speaking.
Oh, nice.
I have it here on my phone right now.
Okay. And it's free to download.
Yeah.
It includes optional in-app purchases as well, but you can remove ads because obviously they need revenue. So there are two ways to do that. They can have the ads or you can pay a little more. So you can remove those. Yeah, I think this means a lot for the fact-checking ecosystem, actually, because it's not a web-only access, but it's a mobile-first approach. And I think more and more people appreciate that. And this is how we live our lives these days. Yes, since many readers consume news via mobile devices, embedding fact-checking into that flow hopefully will increase engagement and reach. And I'm very optimistic about that. The interactive features, I like them a lot as well. And the fact-check ratings adjacent to articles that they seem to use may help bridge the gap between content consumers and verification tools as well. So in the domain of truthful journalism, I think trust and data privacy will be critical, but I'm trusting Snopes to get it right. I think this is a pretty good direction. I really applaud that. Well done, Snopes.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay, so Snopes has been really right, I think, with this. But let's move on to finding out who's been really wrong lately.
Okay, so this is a follow-up of a topic that we covered in episode 498. Concerns the new EU regulations on political advertising on social media, which we reported they are so hard to live up to that many, if not all, social media platforms have decided just to remove anything that looks like a political ad in Europe. And as we feared, this will hit innocent and useful ads too by mistake, and this is what's happening. Cancerfonden is a Swedish organization. It's an NGO. It was founded in 1951, so it's been around for a while. It's changed its name along the way, but Cancerfonden is what it's called now. That means just the Cancer Fund, which is, I guess, easy enough. It's a charity, and over the years they have collected millions of euros for cancer research, and they also run information campaigns in Sweden for the general public. But as a consequence of the new EU regulations, and in this case Meta's reactions to these, all the social media ads that they have promoting mammography have been taken down under the label, quote, political content, end quote. And of course, it's nothing of a kind. But good luck trying to reach anyone at Meta to explain that to and make them put the ads back up. So the effect is, of course, that all of these very important messages have been removed from Facebook and Instagram. As a spokesperson for Cancerfonden says, it is ultimately a question of life and death if people do not see these ads. And Cancerfonden claims that they usually reach hundreds of thousands of people with these ads. So this is information that needs to get out there. Yeah, so I want to give out actually 2 really wrong awards this week. One to EU for creating rules that are too limiting to be useful. And also to Meta, who doesn't have an infrastructure to A, assess these ads as appropriate or not, and B, they don't have a practical way for creators like Cancerfonden to appeal when something is taken down and correct these mistakes. Because this is not political content, this is health information, crucial health information, and they should be allowed and should not fall under these rules anyway.
Cool. Okay, this is yet another example of how we will never run out of really wrong awards to be given out.
Oh, I'm afraid not.
Because there's so many ways to screw things up.
Yeah.
And Meta seems to be adamant in providing examples of that. Thank you very much for that, Pontus.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. But before we move on to that, I'd like to remind our listeners that you can support our work here in many, many ways. One of the ways is you could subscribe to our YouTube channel. You could like our videos. You could do the same thing on any of the platforms that podcasts are available on. And you could leave us a review. So that is probably the greatest help. But you can also support us financially, because there's a lot of financial responsibilities that we have to take with this podcast as well. So you can go on to Patreon.
Absolutely. You go to patreon.com/TheESP and you can see all the levels there, or you can invent your own level as well. That's fine. But don't forget also that just tell a friend is very good. I mean,
yes.
Everything doesn't have to be online. Just tell your brother, tell your mother, tell everybody you meet on the street. Well, not everybody you meet on the street, but you can tell people,
Have
friends,
you heard?
Give them a tip. You should really listen to this podcast. And that is actually, I think, the best way of growing, if everybody would tell a friend.
Well, there's another very good way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you could go on our web shop and buy some of the merch. And you could wear the t-shirt. You could use the mug at your workplace so that people can see what you're drinking from. That's pretty good. And that helps us a great deal. But enough of that, because we have an episode to finish here. And that cannot happen without a quote. And this week's quote, well, we are a little bit late in commemorating her, but I think we are trying to make up for that by bringing a quote from her, and that is Dame Jane Goodall. She said lots of amazing things, but this is what caught my eye recently. Change happens by listening and then starting a dialogue with the people who are doing something you don't believe is right.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't be a dick.
That's not always easy, though. But it's a good idea. Yes.
Exactly. To start a conversation, try to listen and understand, and then you'll probably have a better chance of getting through.
Indeed.
That's an important rule. All right. With that, I'd like to thank you, Pontus, for this week.
Thanks a lot.
Many, many thanks to our listeners as well for tuning in. Please keep doing so. And until next week, goodbye.
Hej då.
Vislat.
This has been your ESP experience.
The show is produced and recorded by TheESP.eu. Join us again next time, but until then, please send your feedback and comments to info@TheESP.eu. We would also love to hear your ideas and suggestions regarding topics, and if you have any skeptical news from any European country, we're always eager to hear about them. If you have an upcoming local event or an organization to promote, please don't hesitate to let us know, as we are more than happy to help. All music in the program was written and performed by Keisha J. Gray and George Robb and is used with their permission. Please check out our webpage for show notes and archive material at theesp.eu. Follow us on Blue Sky at theesp.bsky.social, like us on Facebook or support our work on patreon.com/theesp. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing our content with others.
Driving me crazy. I don't know how you can believe.
You're listening to the ESP, the European Skeptic. What? You're not recording yet?
Nobody is recording anything, or maybe you are, but
I am.
This is what we call a false start.
It's a good thing we've been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah, well, we could have found out
Otherwise,
at the
I
end
don't
of
know
the thing
what
that
we
I
would be
forgot to put the recording on for so we would be have to do it again. As we know, there is nowadays a vaccine against shit. Not there's not a vaccine against shit. There is nowadays a vaccine against chickenpox. I can't say that word. Chickenpox. But as a consequence of the new EU, so I want to give out actually 2 Really Wrong awards. Really Wrong. Really Wrong. Willy Wonka awards. We should have called it that instead. Okay.